I think my favorite part of the Marshall Plan, my favorite anecdote about it at least, comes from the Netherlands. And it has to do with the way that allocation of this fund was made. Marshall Plan, if you remember, World War II happens, and after that, the United States decides that they're going to put about $13 billion into rebuilding and kickstarting European economies again. I was surprised to learn in high school that the Marshall Plan rebuilt Germany. I could not, 16-year-old me could not understand why we had like whooped somebody and then immediately rebuilt them, which seems like pretty logical these days in my mind. We also offered it to the Soviets, and I did not know that until way later. We went to the Soviets, and the United States said, hey, would you like to be in on this? We will help you rebuild. And Stalin said, no, thank you to the U.S. money. That was part of the kickoff that actually led into kind of Cold War. Was right after the war, the U.S. said, hey, let's put you guys in the Marshall Plan as well. And Stalin said, no, thank you. The only other country I think that we didn't support initially with Marshall Plan funding was Spain, and Franco's was doing stuff over there at the time. So we have this money, we send the money over to Europe. The way that money is allocated is a couple of guys that are bipartisan go over and to have their little European tour, right? And first is this guy named Hoffman. Hoffman is a Republican from the Midwest. Second is a guy named Harriman, who is a Democrat from the East. And they team up and they go around and have conversations with everybody in Europe, see what's going on there firsthand. They go to Rome and are treated like absolute kings. They have this like elaborate meals and elaborate lodgings, and they are treated to very, very high standards. This is still Italy post World War II. Everybody's on the struggle bus, but they're treated very, very well. Next stop is the Netherlands. Now, the Netherlands, you have to understand, their post-war approach was what was called the philosophy of labor, and then later became known as the philosophy of productivity, in part because of Marshall funding. And the philosophy of productivity was basically that the war was over and it was still everybody's job to buckle down and live the values that they wanted and keep working towards a whole economy instead of the individual being slacking off, right? They went so far as to have propaganda, marketing for governments, right? That went to the housewife and said, "Hey, it is everyone's job to pitch in here, and part of your job is to make sure that your husband gets to work on time." So they actually put it on the housewives to make sure that their husband was leaving for and getting to work on time, as this philosophy of productivity. They took it very seriously in the Netherlands, and at the time that the Marshall Plan's unfolding, the prime minister in the Netherlands is a guy named Willem Drees, and Willem Drees is hosting Hoffman and Harriman. And he hosts these guys who are part of figuring out where the Marshall Plan money goes. And he hosts them in his home. And I haven't found English translations of this. I've only found the Google Translate translations. So I'm assuming that Google Translate is right in this. But they basically say that the Prime Minister of the Netherlands at the time lived in a modest middle-class house on a dull street in the dullest neighborhood of The Hague. And he invited them over for dinner and hosted them exactly like you would host, friends to supper. And they had a very good conversation, and I'm sure it was good food. And I'm sure they put their best foot forward. But it was in a middle-class house in a dull neighborhood on a dull street that they hosted this conversation with the people who were deciding where the Marshall Plan money was going. And as they were leaving, it was overheard by people in the Netherlands that Hoffman turned to Harriman and said, if is how the prime minister of this country lives, then we can be assured that our money is going to be well spent here. Which I love. I love the idea that like the way that the leadership is acting and hosting, being frugal and austere, and that the person in leadership is living according to their means as well, is like a sign that the Marshall Plan money is going to be well spent. Netherlands does end up getting more than other countries per capita by a little bit. They end up, getting at least their fair share. And that money went towards the philosophy of productivity kind of campaigns. They sent people over to the United States to learn farming techniques. They sent people over to learn workplace management techniques, and did in fact kickstart that economy. So, yeah, Marshall Plan. I love the idea of like the prime minister is just like sitting in his home on a dull street in a dull neighborhood and hosting these guys after they've just come from Rome and been treated like kings.